the note cards. And my audience. Right. Don't start timing until I set it down. Okay, that should be good. Okay. When I say the words Mona Lisa and the Last Supper, what do you think of? Do you think of the images themselves? Do you think of a long time ago? Do you think of the man who painted them? Or do you think of something else? Well, in the 15th century, there was a man named Leonardo da Vinci, who was most well known as an artist. But he had many, many other contributions to science, to the military, but mostly to art. So everybody knows the Mona Lisa. It's probably the most famous picture in the entire world. Most everybody knows the Last Supper. And they consider these masterpieces. But from a technical standpoint, both of these creations are actually failures. I have volunteered at the local elementary schools for 5 years now, and one topic that comes up repeatedly is Leonardo da Vinci. I've done presentations on him to the students multiple times, and he's very, very, very interesting to me, so I've repeatedly gone into extra research on him, so I think fairly knowledgeable about the topic, and he's very, very fascinating in his creations and his experimentations, really. Leonardo, for everything that most people know about him, his major works of Vitruvian Man and Mona Lisa, there's a lot that's little known about him, but he's actually more successful at, such as his military designs. Now, most everything we know about Leonardo da Vinci has been documented in journals that he wrote since the time he was a young boy. It seems like every idea, every thought, every vision he ever had, he wrote down in these journals. Which is interesting enough, but the journals to me are very interesting because he wrote them what people thought at the time was a code. But we now know he wrote from right to left, and he wrote all of his letters backwards. The same way, like if you look at an ambulance, the word ambulance on the hood is backwards, and the letters are inverted. So some people call it mirror writing, because if you hold it up to a mirror, you can read it perfectly. There's a lot of secrecy around this. People think it was encoded. He did this on purpose so other people couldn't read his journals and steal his idea, especially the church, who was very, very powerful at the time. Now people are beginning to think that the reason he wrote it was just quicker. He was left-handed. The ink that they used in those days, if he wrote from left to right, he would smear the whole page. So if he wrote from right to left, it's just quicker to write. Now all these journals are published. A vast majority of them are at the Louvre, but others are scattered all around. And actually, Bill Gates owns some of his works. Yeah. And his journals are still studied today. One of the mysteries about the journal is, although he's documented everything, there's not one entry about the Mona Lisa, his most famous work ever, the worldwide masterpiece. There's not one thing in there about her. Now, the Mona Lisa, she's housed at the Louvre. He was commissioned to paint her by a man named Giocondo. He wanted to have a portrait done of his wife after his baby was born. And he used a new technique of painting where he made it look three-dimensional. That was never done before. Paintings before were very one-dimensional. Realistic, but one-dimensional. In the Mona Lisa, you look like you can actually feel the background. You could actually climb into the picture of her. So this really set him apart from other artists and kind of serves as the model for centuries of what artists are trying to do with realism in art. But I don't think that's what makes the Mona Lisa so interesting. Most people look at it and they wonder why she's smiling and all different things like that, which makes people talk. And the more you talk about it, the more you talk about art, the more famous it gets. So from that standpoint, we think it's a masterpiece, but really, he never finished the painting. actually got cut, the canvas got cut and framed. He never finished it, and he never turned it over to the guy he commissioned it from. He got commissioned from. He kept it with him his entire life. Now, the Last Supper is done at a monastery, and it's in Santa Maria del Grazie in Milan, Italy. And Da Vinci invented a new painting technique. This is a fresco done on the wall, and usually they would put up plaster, and then they would paint on the plaster and wait for it to dry. Well, it took too long for him, so he invented a new way of adding the paint right to the plaster. So he could paint a little and then move on, or walk away even, to work on some of the other things he was interested in. Great idea, and everybody would agree that the Last Supper is a beautiful biblical portrayal of the Last Supper. But before he even finished it, it started flaking off the wall. So really, before it even was finished, people have been restoring it. Now there's a restoration artist who's been working on it for about 5 years, working to remove all the added paint from the various people who've worked on it over the years, to get it back to its original state. So again, beautiful masterpiece, technically a failure. Now what Da Vinci is least known for, but actually most successful at, was his military designs. The church could commission him to do the Mona Lisa and all types of different things, but really he earned most of his money through architecture. He designed a tank, he designed a catapult, he designed a flying machine, he designed a bridge, all these things that he actually went to work for a man named Sforza and another man named Cesare Borgia, and that's how he earned most of his money. Some of these things were just too technical for the people at the time. They didn't have the technology to produce what he would create in his journals. But actually, in Norway, they just constructed a bridge based on Da Vinci's design. So 500 years it took to create the technology that he came up with, for the idea that he came up with. I thought that was fairly interesting. So Leonardo da Vinci is widely recognized as just a brilliant, brilliant artist. But he was so much more than that. He was a visionary in art, science, military, anatomy, physiology, botany, everything. And he's left an amazing legacy for the art world until now.